Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well on this lovely Friday. I'm actually recording this on Thursday afternoon, as you might be able to see from the clock behind me. I wanted to follow up from what Kath was talking about yesterday, well, in a slightly different way. I'm not affected with COVID personally as far as we know, but I did get alerted by contact tracing on Monday that I needed to self-isolate for 8 days because I have been in contact with someone who has tested positive, though I have no details. I went several places last week, so your guess is as good as mine, really. But in any case, we look fine. I've taken the little at-home tests. Everything's clear. But it has gotten me back into my lockdown hobby of baking. I have been doing some baking today. Well, I'm going to be doing some baking today. And it seemed like an apt illustration for our reading, our passage from the Methodist Prayer Handbook for today. Today's reading is from Luke chapter 13, verses 18 to 20. So I'll read it to you because it's short. Let me just pull it up on my little device here. It says, "Then Jesus asked, 'What is the kingdom of God like? What shall I compare it to? It is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his garden. It grew and became a tree, and birds perched in its branches.' Again he said, 'What shall I compare the kingdom of God to? It is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough.'" Well, I don't have 60 pounds of flour, but I am working on making some bread rolls, fancy ones, which, as a disclaimer, you won't see any of the bread making process unless it actually works. This will not be going up unless this actually works. If you're seeing this, you don't have to stress. They're going to come out of the oven, or at least they're going to rise. I don't know if they'll look very pretty, but we'll try and take you through the process anyway. So hold right there and I'll change the scene. So today we're obviously thinking about the kingdom of God and how it works in the world. And the kingdom of God, can mean all sorts of things, really, but ultimately it just comes down to seeing God's actions in our lives and in the world around us. And this parable of the yeast is something that, I didn't really understand until I tried baking for myself. And so, for those of you who bake or have ever seen baking, this won't be new to you, but I still find it fascinating anyway. So we've got our yeast here. I'll cut it open. And what I love about it is that it's just so small. If you can tell that, look at how tiny these little pieces are. Itty bitty little bits. But something even so small goes a long way, even mysteriously. So we're just going to pour it into our little mix here. Just keeps going. There we go. And then as we mix it in, because it is so small perhaps, and so unobtrusive perhaps, it all gets mixed in seamlessly. There's no getting it back out again once it has become a part of the mixture. And by seeing just how mixed in it gets, we might be reminded that there's no part of the world, no part of creation, and no part of our lives even that is not affected by God, by God's actions, by the kingdom of God. So we've got that mixed in. I'm going to keep this going, and we'll hopefully be back in a bit to see what happens next. Well, congrats everyone. We have a dough ball. It smells really good too. Woo. It's sweet rolls, which I don't think are a thing here, but that's why I'm making them now. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, this is where we get to see the yeast do its work. So just like God's action in our lives, the yeast is now, it's in there. And nobody's taking it back out again once it's all mixed in. And now we don't have to do anything. Once we do our job of helping the yeast get into the dough, mixing it up a little bit, then we just sit back and we watch the magic happen. And so it's a bit like how God's actions in the world are. We might be called to help it out a little bit, to help people see it, to help spread it a bit, to mix it in there. But we're not the ones who actually make the growth happen. That's going to happen in God's own time and in God's action. And just like God's grace in the world needs time, God's kingdom in the world needs time. So we're going to put this aside for like an hour to an hour and a half, and hopefully the next time you see it, it will be larger. See what this looks like. Right. Well, it's been about an hour, so I am back with our massive dough ball now. As you can see, the yeast has done its work, and it didn't take any effort on my part. I just had to stick it over here in the warm corner and let it do its thing. Just like, as we remember, this whole thing is about Jesus' very apt parable about the kingdom of God as being those tiny little grains of yeast mixed in to some flour, and then lo and behold, we have this massive risen loaf. Well, it's almost a loaf. We got one more step to complete before we can enjoy it. But it's a nice reminder that after Jesus came into the world, the work of God started and has been mixed up in fun and new ways ever since and hasn't stopped rising. So I am going to hopefully be back with one more installment when we see what this turns into. Cross your fingers. Let's see if it works. But this is pretty good in any case. The yeast has done its part. Now it's my turn. That's the tricky bit. All right. Hopefully see you for one more. Well, y'all, I am back. It has been another little while because there were some more steps involved in the whole process from flour and yeast and some other stuff to dough to rising to shaping and then more rising to baking, but it has been successful. Successful experiment. We now have bread rolls. Look at that. Along with a lot more that will be probably going in the freezer for later. But just to let you all see and maybe want to maybe experiment with your own little metaphors, your own little parables. That yeah, from just a little bit of yeast, we ended up with these beautiful, luscious bread rolls. And so now we can one of my favorite phrases in the Bible: taste and see that the Lord is indeed good. Fun fact: this is the sort of bread that we often use for communion bread in the church. It's not usually homemade. They sell it in the shops. It's a sweeter roll. Oh, it smells nice. But anyway, so it has an extra special meaning, I think, for people like me who are used to this kind of bread for communion. So yeah, we remember that. Remember that next time you're having some bread, but all of the wonderful work of God's good creation that goes into it. Be reminded of the work of God's kingdom in the world, the work of Christ that just gets in there like yeast into some flour, turns into a beautiful, delectable dish. And so I'm going to enjoy this, but I'll see you later. Have a good day.